Hi, and welcome to your Urban Connection. Remember, this is the channel that is often imitated, but is never duplicated. One of the things we do here is we talk about things and issues that others simply refuse to talk about. And today I have a very, very special guest here in Wichita, and he is a nationally known architect. He's been honored all around the country, probably one of the best known Black architects in the country. And his name is Charles McAfee. Welcome to the show, Mr. McAfee.
Pleasure being here.
This, Mr. McAfee, you've had a very distinguished career. And what I want to do is I want to talk about your start as a Wichita native. You went to school here and you went to, uh, you went to Dunbar, right?
Oh,
Elementary?
I lived right across the street from Dunbar Elementary.
Yeah, okay. So, and then of course from there you went to Central High. Did you go to Central? Not Central High, but Central Intermediate.
Went to Dunbar, then Leovicher for the 2 years,
Okay,
Central for one semester, and then
okay.
after that.
Then where? Oh, East High. Yeah, okay, okay. So you're an East High alum. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your early growing up because you grew up in an area that was bounded by Central on the south, uh, 21st Street, or maybe even 13th Street on the north. But I'll go a little further because I know I lived around that time, around 21st and Mathewson. But we'll just say that your area was basically bounded by Central on the south, 13th on the north, Santa Fe Railroad tracks on the west, and then hydraulic on the east. In that area, sir, during the early 50s and 60s, there was a multitude of talented Black males that came from that area of the city. And these are names that you will recall, and then some I might leave out and you can assist me. But there were names like Dr. Ronald Walters, who has received national recognition. We have a library here that's named after him. He was known for his political affiliations, including managing, I believe, one of the initial runs with Jesse Jackson for president. There were others that were involved in that, and we can talk about Lafayette Norwood. We can talk about Linwood Burns. There was uh, Robert. What's his name? He's in Dallas now.
Where?
Uh, but anyway, but there were several people. You had, and I'm thinking now about the basketball players that you had that were involved in that, and a lot of these people were athletes. Just a couple of them went into business, and others went various ways. So you decided to become an architect. What led you to the architectural field?
When I was, a little boy still, World War II was going on. My brother started building model airplanes, and I got used to building things off of a set of plans. And we built all kinds of airplanes. And I liked drawing. And when I went from Dunbar to Leovicher, there was a man by the name of John Carter who taught both woodworking and drafting. And Mr. Carter taught me how to use a T-square and a triangle. And I got really excited about that. And I did it there for 2 years. Then when I went to East High, I took mechanical drawing. I was so good at it that my senior year, I finished everything for the whole year in the first semester. My instructors at East High hired me out to contractors. I was doing a house plan for $10 a house plan. I was making a lot of money
Yeah.
for what I was doing, but I was drawing house plans like crazy. I go home at night, sit at a little drafting table, and I keep drawing. And I kept doing that. I didn't know an architect, never met one, but mom and dad always encouraged the three of us, my sister, my brother, and me, to always look for what we want to do and what we thought would make us happy in life. So I went to the University of Nebraska. The reason I went there was at East High, I scored 19 points as a sophomore. They cut me off the team and kept Lovanas. Lovanas was about 6'4" or 5". I was about 5'7". But they only had one black on the sophomore team, one on the junior team, and one on the senior team, and hadn't won a championship in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep playing amateur basketball with Charlie Gill and Linwood Sexton, Sam Spate, and the Jackson twins, and Barfield, your cousin, your brother.
Brother, yes.
Yes, was all on the same team with us. And so when I got ready to go to college, my mom and dad said, we got to get you out of here because the racism thing was hitting me in every direction. So we looked at schools up north. Well, the one was easiest to get to was the University of Nebraska. My brother drove me up there and left me off at freshman week, and I'm running around with a little red beanie on my head. I went over to play tennis, and nobody would play with me. Came back by, and I heard a basketball in the gym. So I went in to look. There were two guys playing two guys. Another guy showed up. They said, hey, you play basketball? I said, yeah. Come on, we need a third man. So I started playing. Played for about a half hour. There was a guy up in the stands. He came down. He says, you go to school here? I said, yeah. He said, you coming out for the basketball team? I said, no. Because I promised mom and dad, no sports. He said, I think you ought to come out. I said, who are you? My name is Harry Good. I'm the basketball coach. I think you ought to come out. So I went out, didn't tell mom and dad. I make the freshman team. I'm starting lineup freshman team. Freshmen couldn't play varsity back in those days. So I'm home for Christmas week. My dad is reading Sports Illustrated. I walk in the door. He says, who is this outstanding freshman guard at the University of Nebraska named Charles McAfee? I said, Daddy, as you and Mom, they're going to give me some kind of scholarship that would help you and Mom from paying the bills. He said, that wasn't the deal. The deal was you study, we pay. I said, well, now you tell Mama. He said, oh, no, I'm not going to tell your mother. My mother, a little 5'2" woman, back in the kitchen washing dishes. And I was standing there looking down at her, telling her what happened. She kind of turned very slowly and looked up at me. And I thought I could hear the words coming out of her mouth. Go out in the backyard, get the biggest switch, and bring it in here to me. Because I knew I was going to get a whipping. And they stayed with me the whole time. But the sad part about it was, out of the middle of my second semester, in my junior year, in my sophomore year, I get drafted by the Wichita Draft Board to go to the military. They sent me to Kansas City, stayed in a segregated hotel for a week between Christmas and New Year's to get my physical. Then they sent me a notice. I'm to report March the 6th in the middle of second semester. I go to the university to tell them I've been drafted to drop my classes. They didn't drop my classes. They flunked me with 18 hours. That's the way I left Nebraska. Well, I ended up going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was there. That's the first time I'd ever been south in my life. It was a big shock to me. Then they shipped me to Germany. I'd had all my architecture history classes. So at least I knew something about Europe. I traveled all over Europe. I made the European All-Star basketball team. I played tennis matches in some of the greatest resorts in Europe at the time, and traveled all over London, Paris, Rome, every place. But I came home. And when I came home, I was so focused. I was focused to the point where I was going back to school. I didn't care what it took, but I was going to get this degree in architecture. I still haven't met an architect yet.
Okay.
So I end up going through, coming all the way out and graduated at the top of my class. I went by the dean's office and they had marked up my drawing so badly that I thought, what in the world? I turned in 17 sheets of fine line ink drawings. If you looked at those drawings today, you'd think they were done by a computer. And by now, I married Gloria Winston. We had a little girl named Cheryl, who's now my boss.
Yeah.
But when I graduated, I looked at these notes on the dean's desk, and there were all these notes were so bad about my stuff and everything. And I went, oh. So the next day, the dean's in his office. He throws this piece of paper at me. And there's one line said, this is a list of students who don't like the way architecture is taught at the University of Nebraska. My name was second from the top of the list. I looked at the dean. I said, I don't even know this guy. He's a freshman instructor. I've never met him. He came here, stayed 1 week, 1 semester, and left. I'd never met the guy. I looked at the dean. By now, my attitude is Charles McAfee. I looked at the dean and I said, I want to tell you something. I will graduate from this place if I have to stand on my head. And you and nobody else better get in my way. I came out there at the top in my class. When I left there, my daddy walked me across the campus, put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, I've done now what I wanted to do in life. I could not finish high school, but I wanted all 3 of you to have a quality education. My sister graduated top in honors at Wichita University. My brother graduated from there, wanted to be a basketball coach, couldn't get a job in the state of Kansas. My sister couldn't get a decent job, ended up going to California, and years later, retired as the head of the outpatient hematology outpatient clinic at UCLA Medical School. My brother, with 4 or 5 Hall of Fame awards, took one of his teams to the Final Four, served on the NC2A Council, he was vice president-elect of the National Basketball Coaches Association. All of these things with just the 3 of us. But we're not unique. We're part of this Kansas tradition of what everybody wants to call the hood or the ghetto. Years later, I got a contract doing work for the Wichita Eagle. And Britt Brown, who was a tremendous independent kind of guy, he and I got very close about stuff I was doing for him and everything. And one day, his paper wrote an article about the ghetto and the hood, which I didn't like. And I went over to his office and I said, I'm sick to death of your newspaper. He said, what do we do? I told him. So about a week later, the whole front page of the Wichita Eagle was an article about Curtis McClinton and his family, Marvin Stone and his family, and Charles McAfee, with a picture of me and my mama sitting on the front page of the Wichita Eagle, because that's the way we got stuff done. We had to demand quality about what it was we were doing. And so when I went to work, you had to work for at least a registered architect for 3 years before you could ever take the exam. Well, I finally took the exam and opened my own office. But before I opened my office, I had one little job. And I came home one night about 11 o'clock. I had a little drafting table about 5 foot wide in my utility room with the washer and dryer. I started drawing, and I drew all night. My wife came in early the next morning and said, what are you singing about? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're singing. I said, what am I singing? You're singing design, Charlie, design. I was. I had finished the RAU Bank's house. I didn't change anything. I opened the office. My father and I built all my furniture and stuff. We painted the place on the second floor of Main and Elm. We submitted this house that was built by the most talented technician I have ever seen, a man by the name of Thornton Clark, who went to a vocational school in Mississippi, came to Wichita. He was the best carpenter, the best millwork, the best framer, the best masonry that I've ever met in my life.
Best carpet cabinet maker.
That's no question, no question. So I submitted this thing for an award. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got this letter from FHA, Washington, D.C. My secretary at that time was Emmerdale Robbins. And Emmerdale looked at it and I tossed it back on the desk and I said, open it. We won that design award. And she opened it. She says, we did. And I read it and it said, first honor award, RAU Bank's residence. Talked about the date when it was, but didn't send me any more information. So I'm waiting and waiting to get some other information. Didn't get it. So I called. The woman says, you didn't receive anything else? I said, no. She said, oh my. So I had to borrow the money from my mother and father for Gloria and I to go to Washington to get this award. Now, Gloria graduated from Howard, so she'd been to D.C. But old dumb me, I had never been there. I bought a ticket to Baltimore. I thought that's close enough.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 30 miles away. So when we got off the plane, there was a public announcement with Charles McAfee, please go to a paging phone for a call from Dr. Robert C. Weaver. And I'm going like, what? So I go to a paging phone and Dr. Weaver is saying, please call the office first thing in the morning. So we went to the hotel, got up the next morning, called the office. The lady said, we're just right down the street from you, so just come down and you'll get all the things that you haven't gotten yet. So Gloria and I walked in this office, and the lady said, are you Mr. McAfee? And I said, yes. The woman jumped up and ran out of the room. And I'm looking at Gloria, and Gloria's looking and said, what's going on? So she comes back in with another woman by the arm. This is Mr. McAfee. And then one of them said, Dr. Weaver is going to be so proud. Well, Dr. Weaver would become the first secretary of any president in the history of the United States. So they said, well, go back. The deputy is taking pictures with the award winners. And as soon as the one comes out, you go in and get your picture taken. So I went in, and I was standing there, and Gloria and I were standing there. And all of a sudden, the guy comes out the door. He looks at me and he says, are you one of the award winners? And I said, yes. And he said, I remember those days. It was I.M. Pei, the great Chinese architect who had come to the United States, gone to Harvard, became the architect for the biggest developer in the country, invited us to come to New York to visit his office. I started to ask him if he had to borrow the money from his daddy to come get the award. But I didn't, because later on I found out his father was the president of the Bank of China. So he didn't need to borrow any money. But Gloria and I ended up going to New York after it was all over. But when the awards came up on the screen, 2,000 people sitting in the audience. RAU Bank's residence, Wichita, Kansas, architect Charles McAfee. You could hear 2,000 people say, who, where? Because all the others, 3 of the 4 biggest and most prestigious architectural firms in the country were 3 of the other award winners. So I was like, I got so much publicity within a few months. I had projects from Maine to Texas, and I was on an airplane going everywhere. My first major project was in Tulsa. It was the first major project after the Tulsa bombings. And it was a 125 unit apartment complex for a United Methodist Church. And then it just kept going. And so at the same time, I'm still playing a lot of tennis. I'm still playing basketball, and I just got too busy to do anything else. But because of all the traveling I did, I was at a tennis tournament in New Orleans, a black tennis tournament. And at that tournament, Arthur Ashe, Bill Cosby, and a guy named Gordon Parks. And in Wichita, his oldest brother, Clemmy Parks, served on the Black YMCA board like I did. So what happened was I went over and met Gordon, and I told him, I said, who I was, and he invited me to dinner that night with him and his grandson who was with him at the tournament. And I said, Gordon, I just finished a museum on Wichita State's campus, the McKnight Art Center and the Ulrich Museum. And I'd like for you to come do an exhibit of your photographs. He said, I'm never going back to Canada. I said, what? I said, excuse me, this is before cell phones. I went to the phone, I called Bobby Humphrey, who lived across the street from us on Indiana. I said, Bobby, I'm having dinner with Gordon Parks. He said, Charlie, he won't answer our letters. He won't return our phone calls. I said, I want to invite him to the museum. I said, call the museum director, Martin Bush. I called Martin Bush. Martin Bush said, I'll change everything second semester if he'll agree to come. So I went back and sat down. I said, Gordon, I got it all set up for you. Second semester at Wichita State. He said, you really want me to do that? He said, I don't want to go back to Kansas. So I talked him into it, and he came back. That's how Wichita State originally got all of those photographs of Gordon Parks. Gordon and I became very, very close friends for years and years. I traveled with him all over the country. I was with him in some of his biggest exhibits. And what it let me know was, here's a little guy who never graduated from high school from Fort Scott, Kansas. I'm looking at all the people who just grew up in my neighborhood in Wichita. Linwood Sexton, All-American, Wichita University, All-World at East High. Curtis Hightower got run off the basketball court but with the police escort. Then comes Cleo Littleton, the greatest scorer that school has ever had. Right around the corner from where Cleo lived was Curtis McClinton. When you read about the Kansas City Chiefs and you see about the Kansas, do you hear anybody in Wichita talk about Curtis McClinton? He was Rookie of the Year. He was All-American at KU. He's still the sixth most number of yards run for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is Curtis McClinton from Wichita, Kansas.
North High.
Yeah. I mean, we got all of these guys. The Jernigan family, 5 great Black architects. There are so many more. Willie Robinson, Lester Scott, so many more.
Charlie, you're getting a little bit ahead of me. Let me go back to the Wichita Eagle. Now, was that the first commercial design contract that you were awarded here in Wichita?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you get an award for that design, for that building?
That's one of the awards I won, was when I did the East Edition to the Wichita Eagle. I won a first honor award for that building.
Okay, of course, that building is now, within the last, 5 years or so, has been torn down and replaced with another building. But just for the sake of the people that don't know, that building was in the 800 block of East Douglas, was it not?
Right.
Okay. All right. Now, after that, what did you next get in terms of a contract from anybody within the city of Wichita?
I put together a team and we won the design award for the new zoo project. They cut it to 5 and interviewed. They cut it to 3 and interviewed, and we won it. But there was a very wealthy oil man in Wichita who called a special board meeting, said, I like Charles. And when I have some private work done, I'm going to hire him to do my work. But this is $20 million of the public's money, and we can't trust him with that. See, what these folk didn't understand was every time they put the crap on me, I get on a big plane air and I'd fly around the country like a Kansas prairie hawk. And I'd circle and circle and circle until I'd see the fattest rabbit I could find, and I'd go get it. That's what happened. I went to Atlanta one day, and a guy said, I was at the AIA convention. Guy said, you an architect? I got badges all over me say I'm an architect. I said, yeah, I'm an architect. Well, we got to have some Black architects design the new subway system in Atlanta. Will you come to a meeting? I said, I'll come. So I went. So this guy really didn't want to say what he was saying, but he had to. So there were 2 Black women, one on each side of him, at this meeting. He gets up and leaves. And this one woman said, where are you from? I said, her name was Eustaine Talley. She said, I said, Wichita. She said, I'm from Emporia. I said, you're kidding me. And then she said, is your brother the coach at Morehouse? I said, that's my brother. Oh, well, my brother had been the assistant coach at Emporia State. So she said, I want you to go back to Wichita, write a letter. Tell them you want to come down here and do a presentation to show what you've done. So I did. About 2 months later, they put out a request for proposals for 2 projects, Art Center, which was 20 million, and Midtown, which was 35 million. I went for the 35 million. So when we turned it in and got selected, I said, your preliminary concept doesn't work. Guys said, what are you talking about? I mean, they were really upset, telling them they didn't know what they were doing. I said, read the code. It does not meet the code guidelines. Well, you can redesign it, but if it goes over the budget, it'll come off your fee. I redesigned it, saved them $4 million. That was my success in Atlanta. So from then, it just went everywhere in Atlanta.
So let me ask you this, Charlie. You and I'm gonna bring you back to Wichita right now. You designed the I believe it was called the Calvary Towers.
Calvary
There,
Towers,
26th and Grove.
absolutely.
You designed that, okay? And then you designed. You talked about Eubanks House, but what else in Wichita did you design? And of course, we all know about the McAfee pool, but what else have you designed here in Wichita? And then we're going to talk about your other, like your. We know that you designed the Olympics there, and you got rewards for that. But basically, I want to focus a little bit on Wichita, because you're not you. Now let's talk about the oil man you're saying, and he said we can't trust him with his $20 million public project. Was that because of your race?
Well, listen, just stick on 13th Street for a while.
Okay.
Pool is on 13th Street. Across the street from the pool is Jackson Mortuary. One design award for that. Across the street from Jackson Mortuary to the east is the first 2-story modular house we made when the Jacksons and I opened the modular factory. We had 200 people working for us when we did that factory and built those buildings. Go down the street 13th, a little further. There's the dental office building, won a design award for Dennis Jones's building.
Yes, 13th and hydraulic.
Go on down the street, we won a design award for another modular house that the city tore down. Dr. Curry's Animal Hospital.
13th and Spruce.
North of that was
Madison.
Then you go on up to 17th Street. Right there at 17th and Fairmount is the entryway to the university. I won 4 or 5 design awards for the McNutt Art building. Does not have my name on it as architect. See, I've done a lot of good stuff, but I've made a lot of enemies. And so it just keeps rolling, but it doesn't. It rolls off my back because I expect it and keep on going.
Okay, so tell us about the Olympic project that you did.
The Olympic project, a guy came in, Andy Young, out of Congress, and now mayor of Atlanta, and had been ambassador to the United Nations, appointed by Jimmy Carter. So this guy came in Andy's office and said, I'd like to bring the Olympics to Atlanta. And as the guy told, he says, he thought Andy was ignoring him because Andy was looking out the window. And so he made his spiel, a guy named Billy Payne. He made his spiel to Andy, and then he just stopped. And Andy turned and looked at him and said, yes, let's do it. And he said, I didn't think you were paying attention. He said, I was counting votes. He was counting Asian votes, African votes. It was the 100th anniversary of the Olympics to go to Athens. So that was the place they wanted to go. It came to Atlanta. When it came to Atlanta, we only had 4 years. Maynard Jackson announced Atlanta. When we got the contract to design the whole thing, there was a construction company out of Tennessee, a firm out of New York, which was a program management firm, us, and a minority firm that was supposed to make certain that the Olympics hired more minorities to do the work. Well, I took Cheryl, I came back home, and Cheryl was in the office in Wichita. We had an office in Kansas City at the time. And I walked in the office and I said, baby, I said, we got the Olympics. She said, Daddy, I'm out of here. So Cheryl moved to Atlanta. She was the prime architect in control design for all 32 venues for the 1996 Olympics. And did an outstanding job with all of that. We made everything, we got everything done in that 4 years, and the Olympics took place. In the meantime, I'd met people who were heroes of mine, like the great quarter milers from the United States, and especially Jamaica. So it was such an international event where you met people from all over every place. I had 700 tickets that I could give away, couldn't sell them, I could give away. I came home and made announcements that I had all these tickets. I only got 2 phone calls. One of them came from the guy who used to head the labor union here. His daughter was on the rowing team at WSU. So I gave them tickets, gold medal tickets to the rowing. The other one was the great Black woman entertainer from Wichita who lived right around the corner, on the corner of 8th and Ohio.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. She just passed away here, what, just recently.
Yes.
Yes.
And she called me and she said, Mr. McAfee, I've always wanted to go
Paula
to
Burns.
Paula Burns. Said, I wanted to go to the Olympics. Could I get some tickets? I said, Carla, come over. She came to the office. I gave her gold medal tickets to baseball, gold medal tickets to soccer, gold medal. I think I gave her gold medal at least 5 different events. I was coming up for the gold medal game for soccer. And as I was coming up the steps, I heard this voice, Mr. McAfee. And I looked up and it was Carla. And she was standing up. You know, she was a very heavy lady. She says, look what I got, and reached down in her bosom. And I thought, oh my God, she pulled a baseball out. When she went to the gold medal baseball game, somebody hit a foul ball that landed right in her lap. So she was carrying the foul ball. It was such an incredible thing. Then at the gold medal basketball game, Cheryl called me. Cheryl is now at a desk where a technical person and a law enforcement person and a red phone in the middle. The red phone was to the president of the United States. And they got this huge screen, television cameras everywhere. Cheryl says, Daddy, don't leave at halftime. I said, what? She said, just don't leave. At halftime of the basketball game, the chairman of the Olympic Committee comes out in a golf cart with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali had gotten so annoyed and disgusted, he threw his gold medal for boxing in the river in his hometown. They gave him back his gold medal. And so there were all kinds of marvelous things that were going on with all of this. And it really showed you how people of all races with a commitment to excellence can get along and do things right. And that's what this whole Olympic thing for the 4 years that we were working on the projects, that's what it all turned out to be.
Now, Charlie, we talked about your accolades here in Wichita, but you're known, and of course the Olympics, but you're known far wider for all of your accomplishments across the United States. And within what, the last 30 to 45 days, you were invited to New York by the Ford Foundation and also another foundation to be honored. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The city of Wichita submitted my name because the Getty Foundation had offered $150,000 awards for modern projects designed by Black architects. The city of Wichita submitted McAdams Pool, which is now named after me, the Charles McAfee Pool. But the committee submitted it, got the award, and one day a young woman called me up and said, Mr. McAfee, could I come interview you? I said, for what? So the city got $150,000 for the pool you designed. I said, they got a what? He said, yeah, they just accepted it today at the, she came out and interviewed me. So she started explaining to me how the city got this money. They haven't called me and offered me a cup of coffee or nothing, or a thank you or anything. So I called my daughters and we talked about it. So we kind of let it go for a while. About 2-3 weeks later, got this call from a lady who represented the J. Paul Getty Foundation Museum in Los Angeles, wanting to do an article. So I said, I only do articles if my daughters, who are architects, or do it, because I have now turned the ownership of the firm over to them. So she said, fine. So all three of us got on this interview. It came out in a magazine. And I want you to see this. This is the cover of it. The Getty, it was a fall magazine of the Getty magazine. Now there's a centerfold for you. That's McAdams, Wichita, Kansas. And it's a 6-page article. And I have been in books and interviewed many, many times. This one shocked me more than anything up to this day that I've ever been written about, because it was very personal. Pictures include my daughters and me, the architects, both of them. And before I could hardly absorb that, I get this invitation from the Ford Foundation. Because of this award, I was invited to go to New York. So I'm trying to promote my daughters, not me anymore. I'm just turned 91, my 91st birthday. No, Daddy, it's about you and you're going. So I don't want to go by myself. One of you got to go. Well, they arranged all of it. Charles got the airline ticket to go from Wichita to pick up Cheryl in Atlanta to New York. Charles' 2 children, my grandchildren, are both college graduates and now working in New York City. Cheryl's daughter is working in New York City for CBS Records or CBS Television. So we get off the plane, go in and have dinner with grandkids. The next day, we're at the Ford Foundation with 300 people from all over the country. The woman who is the mistress of ceremonies and was the chairman of this division of Ford Foundation was Felicia Rashad, remember from Bill Cosby show. So she got up and said, we have raised $97 million this year to continue cataloging Black activities. So she goes off the stage, and about 4 or 5 minutes later, I'm sitting on the aisle seat. Somebody walks up in front of me. It was Felicia Rashad. I looked over at her and I grabbed her hand, and I said, I want you to know you're one of my heroes, because you were the first Black woman on television who wasn't singing or being a maid, but you were a Black woman on a television program. My babies grew up looking at you, understanding that other than their mama, there are other Black women who should be in these positions. During the intermission, she was sitting right in front of me. My grandson and granddaughter came in. Cheryl came over. Then my nephew, born in Wichita, Kansas, in the ghetto, who is now a lawyer for the National Football League headquarters in New York City, and his daughter, who just graduated from Bates with honors. And she says, the whole McAfee group is here. I said, that's just part of it. This is a small part. But we had a marvelous time. And I told her, I said, I came because I want the Gordon Parks Creative Center in Wichita State University, and I'm looking for the money. So I've got a call in to see whether or not we can raise the money from the Ford Foundation and the Getty Foundation to bring Ford Foundation to inner city America. Because when I talked about what I talked about with the microphone, there were 2 great compromises made when this country was formed. the first great compromise was half slave and half free. The second great compromise was Missouri came in as a slave state and Kansas came in as a free state. And I'm still trying to prove that Kansas came in as a free state. And I'm still trying to prove that.
Charles, I want to say this. Time is becoming of the essence here. I want to say this. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up your two daughters, Cheryl and Cheryl. Is that right?
Charles,
Charles. Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned you're 90, you just turned 91. You've turned the business over to them. And I want you to tell me if I'm correct. They have two offices outside of Wichita, one in Dallas, that's run by, is that Cheryl?
Charles,
Charles. Okay, and then one in Atlanta, and that's run by Cheryl.
yes.
Okay, all right.
But I have
They both are architects, right?
right.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure. I did want to bring them in. I did want to give them credit for stepping in and taking over what you started and carried out. Because one of the things I want to mention is too oftentimes in the Black community we don't have that. Okay, we don't have children that want to come in and take over what the parent has started. You know what I mean? And then when they do, they drive it into the ground, such is the case with uh, 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 Johnny Johnson of Ebony Magazine, John H. Johnson. Okay, when his daughter got involved, John had run a very, very, very successful Black magazine operation and a cosmetic operation designed for Black women. And you see what happened to it. So I want to give a shout out to both of your daughters for stepping in and getting behind and doing what they learned from you, okay, and carrying it forward. Hats off
Oh,
to
but
them.
let me interrupt you for a second.
Okay.
I have a third daughter who I think is the smartest of the three. Went all the way through KU, then the University of Texas, got her PhD from Creighton, applied for a job as a vice president of a hospital group in California. They gave it to another guy who wasn't half qualified. So my baby says, "Daddy, I'm starting my own company." I said, "What's the name of the company?" She's teaching a company about diversity. About a month or so later, she says, "I'm going to be going to Spain in a couple of months." I said, "For what?" She said, "I'm giving a lecture in Barcelona, Spain about diversity." That's my middle daughter, Pamela.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
All
Okay.
right. So I can't
Well,
leave nobody out.
all right. Congratulations to her and hats off to her. Now,
Right.
one final question and before we go. So what do you see moving forward? Are you optimistic about establishing the Gordon Parks Museum here in the city?
I am very optimistic about it because what I've talked to the people about so far is not just about Kansas. What it's about, not just about Wichita, I'm sorry, but it's about Kansas. It starts when my great grandpa came across that river at a place that is now Kansas City in a covered wagon after he got wounded in the Union Army and settled where the rivers came together. It's about Topeka on the way. It's about Emporia on the way. It's about Wichita. And it's surely about Nicodemus. The whole district I did the planning project in Kansas City was a mile square from Hallmark cards to the black baseball diamond, from 12th Street all the way to 27th, which included that whole district now is a National Historic District in Kansas City. I have talked to Ford Carr to talk to him about trying to get the ghetto, the neighborhood, whatever you want to call it, as a National Historic Place and include all of these other places in Kansas so that we can get the kind of funding and the kind of planning money that's necessary to get this done. This is Kansas. I'm very proud of it. I wouldn't still be here if I wasn't. It kind of reminds me of what Jesse Jackson once said when he gave a speech at the Democratic convention and they didn't give him the vice president spot. Jesse Jackson said, if I have apologized or if I have offended anyone, it came from my mouth, not my heart, because God ain't through with me yet.
On that note, Mr. McAfee, let me say that it was a pleasure talking to you, and I could go on talking to you for another hour, but the essence of time won't allow it. So I really appreciate you taking the time out and sharing with me the information that you've shared with me and my audience. And I appreciate having you, sir, and we'll look forward to doing it again. Okay? Thanks very much, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, folks, that's our show for today, and we'll see you soon with another exciting edition of Your Urban Connection.